This is the Philadelphia Flyers Young Star Ranking. I'm going to go through players drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers from the years of 2014 to 2020. The catch is I'm going to do it by position. I'm going to try to avoid a lot of these apples and oranges situations, and I'm going to try to compare players that have maybe a future role alignment with the other players and try to avoid some of these goaltender center type of relationships. Let's get into it. Let's talk right-handed defenseman. Went through left-handed defenseman as well. If you guys didn't see that, go check out the other video. Right-handed defenseman. This is an interesting list because this list has some room for arguments in it. The right-handed group is always a more rare selection of players. There's just less right-handed defensemen at the pro level. For whatever reason, less get drafted. I don't know if hockey players seem to think left brain or left-handed or what it is. But they tend to be a little bit more rare. So the Flyers have one less right-handed defenseman and don't have the level of elite crop, but have a really good crop of right-handed defensemen. So starting at the bottom of the list, I have Jack St. Ivany. Jack St. Ivany is a good player. He's a decent prospect, but hasn't really shown enough so far to kind of make his way up this list. He might have an NHL future. We really don't know. With a player like him, I really think that he's the type of guy that you probably need to give time to develop to see if he turns into an NHL player. Most likely he's going to be an AHL guy, but we'll see. We'll see how he develops. We'll see how he moves forward. I never saw anything from him at Dev Camp that necessarily made him stick out of the crowd, but I didn't see anything bad from him either. So I just see a nice template of a player and maybe could end up being a pro in the future. But he does look like an AHL guy, and playing NCAA hockey is a pretty good route to make your way into the AHL. So I think, maybe another year, maybe he'll finish college hockey, but I could see him playing with the Phantoms relatively soon. He's definitely, as far as a later pick at 112, he's definitely a pretty good late pick, and especially being right-handed, there's really no risk because this is a guy who could end up being an NHL player one day, and you essentially got him for nothing, and he's a right-handed defenseman, so even in a trade, he might be worth more than his even draft position. So maybe even a player who's moved later on for some value. We'll see. Number 5 on this list is Adam Yiping. Now, Adam Yiping is a player who was taken in the second round, number 50. Again, if you look at like Emil Andre, he was taken at 54 this past year. Yiping was taken above him. Now, Yiping has not developed anywhere to the player that people were hoping. He was taken because he was actually playing with Rasmus Sandin. He was a partner of his who's already playing against men. Having said that, he is playing against men at a young age. He's big, he's strong, he's more of a shutdown defenseman. He's not the best skater, but he's not terrible. He's kind of like a poor man's Colton Parayko without the skill. I'm not saying he's Colton Parayko, but you're just looking at a guy who can move. He can hit, he can block shots. He definitely has leadership elements. Right now, he does not project to be an NHL player, unfortunately, in the second round. He's not playing enough against men to make me think that. But that could change. He's a defenseman. I don't know if it's a work ethic, if it's a skill thing. Maybe not, but it shows Flyers kind of missed on this one a little bit. I don't know if Yiping was the best pick in a second round, but he's a defenseman, so you want to give him time. He could end up making the NHL. He could come over to the AHL and get a real shot. And the Flyers do have kind of a need for more physical defensemen, so it makes sense why they go after him. I just don't know if this was the best investment in a defenseman. And, I'm not bringing up Sam Morin, but again, this is why Morin was drafted so high. He's a big, strong, physical defenseman who definitely projected to be an NHL player. They're not as easy to find as people think, especially ones that can really skate and have like big wingspans and whatnot. So we'll see what happens with Yiping, but I wouldn't say the odds are great. I'd say the names above him are a clear-cut difference. And the name above him that I go with next, and again, the next 3 of this list, they're interchangeable to me. This is a very tough one to make because all 3 of them, in my opinion, have the same floor. I just am not certain on their ceilings, and I'm taking into account age and experience and what they've done over the past couple of years since they've been drafted. So next on the list at number 4 is Ronald Attard. Now Attard, got drafted as an overager. He's big. He's strong. He's got a huge shot. He's a good skater. He's got a great attitude about him. Again, he's playing in a really good program in college as well with other good players. He was just a teammate of Wade Allison. So this is a good player, and this is a guy who could turn out to be a serious NHL player, maybe a number 5 in the NHL, but definitely a bottom pairing guy, projects at this point. Didn't have a great offensive output like he did the year before that. He was putting up, I think he put 20 goals up the year before that, playing the more juniors level. But college hockey, there's a transition. He's a little bit older, so you do kind of want to knock him down a peg, and that's why he's at the bottom of the 3 of these players. But he does have great size, great shot, great skill for a guy his size. Projects to be an NHL player. I like him. I'm excited about him. And if push comes to shove, you can even get him to, get me to move him up my list. But it's going to depend on what he does moving forward. Right now, I feel nicely with him where he is at 4. But he could move up depending on output. Number 3 on the list, Wyatte Wylie. Now, Wyatt Wylie got the nod over Ronald Attard because, quite frankly, he's got really good size at 6'2". He put up fantastic numbers in juniors last year, very similar to what Zamula did. He doesn't have the same prestige. He's a little older than Zamula, but he doesn't have the same, I think he's a year older. He doesn't have the same prestige that Zamula has, but he clearly has an NHL upside. He was immensely important to his team. And if you guys want to hear more about this, Steve Corigliano's, the draft analyst episode that I did, Getting Gritty, we go through a bunch of these players. This is one guy that he is very high on. And he didn't necessarily move up my list because Corigliano's is high on him. He moved up my list because of his offensive output, because of his size, the fact that I think he's going to play a big role for the Phantoms next year. And I'm really hoping that he can, get to a point where he's playing in the NHL in the near future, but he's got a lot of depth in front of him, but he definitely projects to be an NHL player at this point. At the very least, maybe he gets traded in a package, but I really like him in the system. I really like him moving his way up. We'll probably forget about him a little bit. He'll take a little bit probably to be NHL ready, but he has a complete two-way game. So that's really exciting. He was heavily relied upon in juniors, so you never really know. He could be a guy who turns out to be better, and he could be better than the number 2 guy on my list in the end. Number 2 on my list is Mark Friedman. Now, Mark Friedman, again, the reason he gets the nod, he already played in the NHL, had really good AHL success, especially for what he brings to the table, and was a really good college hockey player. So while I compliment the other guys, he still had the edge pretty much everywhere at this point because, one, he played well in college hockey. I believe by the end he led his league for points amongst defensemen. So this isn't necessarily a guy who doesn't put up points. He still projects to be an NHL bottom 6 guy, I'd say. He could do above that, maybe a number 5, maybe a number 4 even. He's slightly undersized. That's really what hurts Friedman. He has the toughness, the tenacity, but at 5'11", if he was a little bit bigger, he'd be like a straight shot in the NHL. I think he would have been in there a little bit earlier. His size will hold him back, but not hold him back from a pro future. Maybe just, maybe some people would jump over him because of their, natural gifts. Having said that, he has he's got a lot of mental toughness. He backs down from nobody. He's got a two-way game for sure. Has offensive upside. Already played in the NHL. I think at the number 2 is a perfect spot for him. And I think that's where a lot of people see him, right? He's a guy who's maybe number 8 in the Flyers depth chart right now, and a guy that maybe could play, barring injuries, might be playing in the starting lineup for all we know, depending on how the season starts. There's always injuries, and there's always injuries on defense. So feel really good with Mark Friedman. Again, doesn't project to be a top 4 guy. Could and again, I don't want to limit him completely. He's a little bit older. I don't think he's going to ever end up there, but he's definitely a bottom pairing guy in the NHL. And if he doesn't play for the Flyers, he'll play for somewhere else. At the very least, he's an AHL all-star defenseman, in my opinion, at least heavily relied upon. All-star is kind of a nonsense statement, but he's definitely a really good AHL guy, and a lot of times those guys are swing NHL guys. So again, bottom pairing to AHL top guy. I think that's where he is right now, but NHL future for him. Hopefully can impress quite a bit. Last but not least, this is the creme de la creme of the right-handed defenseman within the Flyers system, Philip Myers. Now, Myers, again, an undrafted, and again, to get a guy this good undrafted, I brought up Zamula in my other video. I I think Zamula is also obviously a very similar representation of this, but Phil Myers is inching his way into top pairing potential. Travis Sanheim is a little ahead of him. He's a year older. He has a little bit tighter of a game, too. Sanheim's a little bit less risky in a lot of the plays that he makes. He keeps things a little bit simpler, which I think helps him. That's why Sanheim's future is probably now, where Phil Myers will get elevated next year. He's in a contract dispute with the Flyers. Probably won't get as much as he likes, but he probably will get signed. I see him as a future top pairing guy, a complementary top pairing guy for a guy like Provorov. Hopefully we see him with Provorov at some point this year. I think it's a really interesting combination, and with his size, his speed, his skill, his sense, his meanness, every aspect of his game I love, and I am super high on him. He could end up, I don't know if he's going to be a number one guy like Thomas Chabot, who is his partner, but again, look how well he complimented Chabot back in the day. He's going to complement a guy like Provorov, and it doesn't mean he's not a top pairing guy because he's a complimentary guy, but those guys, complimentary guys really help. It means that he's probably not going to be a 25-minute-a-night defenseman. He might not be a Cam York type of guy to rely upon mentally, like maybe Travis Sanheim, but he definitely has that game-breaking ability all throughout his game, and if his game cleans up, top pairing for sure. At the very least, he's a top 4 defender. Arguably he already is today, and I expect his role will move up. So again, in review, Phil Myers at number 1, Mark Friedman number 2, Wylie at number 3, Ronald Attard at number 4, Adam Yiping at number 5, and Jack St. Ivany at number 6. That is a pretty damn good crop. Again, a lot of those guys have NHL upside. Some of them are not that high of an upside, so I don't want to say it's like a best group of right-handed defensemen we could ever ask for, but the fact that Phil Myers at the top, and then you have guys like Wylie and Attard who are kind of these kind of wild cards that could end up being better than anybody anticipated, that's a really nice place to sit. I would say the Flyers will look to add some depth there. I think it's quite clear, with Friedman and Myers graduating, they're going to be looking for probably more right-handed defensemen in the future to add to that crop, but it's a really good place to start and makes me feel really comfortable with the right-handed position on him. So looking good and looking good for the future.